Welcome to today's climate finance webinar. I am Charlotte Kilpatrick, the digital editor for Alliance. During today's session, we'll be discussing what investments foundations should make and whether they can contribute to a sustainable future while sustaining their own endowments. To discuss all this and more, I'm delighted to welcome some of the people and organizations who are working tirelessly in this space. With me today are Elise Larkin, Director of Global Economic Recovery at the Rockefeller Foundation, Paula Ellinger, Climate Action Director at Fondation Avina, Marati Abdullah, Program Officer of Natural Resources and Climate Change at Ford Foundation, and Kevin Tan, CEO at Trisector Associates. A few things to note before we begin. There are two ways you can get involved. First, feel free to introduce yourself using the chat function on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. You should be able to see a little speech bubble. You can also use this chat if you're having any issues with your audio or video. Our team are behind the scene and ready to help. You can put questions to our panelists at any time using the Slido Q&A on the right-hand side of your screen. As well as asking on your own, you'll be able to upvote others' questions if you'd like to see that question asked. We'll be keeping an eye on this throughout the webinar and selecting questions to be put to Elise, Kevin, Paula, or Mariatti. Should you wish to do so, on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, you'll see a CC button. This allows for closed captioning in English and several other languages. We encourage you to use this if needed. And very important for those of you who are not subscribed to Alliance, you can use the code EVENT24 to get a 20% discount for a full year's subscription. You can find all that and the link in the chat. So diving right in, I will go first to Elise. Elise is currently the Director of Global Economic Recovery at the Rockefeller Foundation, where she works on mobilizing more and better quality finance for climate and development. Prior to this, she held a number of roles in the UK government, most recently as Senior Environment Policy Advisor to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. During the UK's COP26 presidency year, she was Chief of Staff to COP President Alok Sharma. She also worked as Private Secretary to Prime Minister Boris Johnson and as Senior Press Officer for Prime Minister Theresa May, covering Brexit, economy, and energy. She has also previously held positions in the UK Ministry of Defence, Department of Transport, and the Department for International Trade. Okay, so hello, Elise.
What an introduction. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi. So we'll be bouncing the first question to you. So I guess to give an overall sort of global look at this, what does it mean for you to invest in climate, and how do you go about doing this?
So this is something that we have been thinking a lot about at the Rockefeller Foundation over the last, 6 months to a year, because we announced last September that we are going to pivot 75% of our programming over the next 5 years to climate action and climate change focused programming, and we're going to be spending about $1 billion over that time period. And lots of people like me who looked at the foundation from the outside might have assumed that given our quite recognizable brand, given our involvement in things like the Bridgetown Initiative, we were already doing lots on climate, but actually it was only about 25% of our programming over the last 5 years. So this is a really big shift for us. And so alongside that, I think one of the things that we felt that it needs to mean is that we wanted our operations and the way that we run the foundation to be aligned with the same climate goals that we're trying to finance through our grant making. So in 2020, we divested our endowment from fossil fuels, and we were the largest foundation to do so at that time. We're also aiming for net zero in terms of all of our operations by 2050, and it was quite important to us that we set that target at the same time as we announced our new climate strategy and the amount of our programming that was going to be pivoting towards climate, because we wanted to almost have a proof point that was our own operations as well. And I think the way that we've tried to approach this is by leveraging the things that we already see as our strengths as a foundation, you know, bringing people together, unlikely actors often together to solve problems. I'm actually at a conference that we're facilitating today in Bellagio, where we've got a bunch of people that have never been in a room together before to talk about some geopolitical issues and try and come up with some new thinking. So that's something that we wanted to bring. I think we also wanted to use the strength of our profile, which we've built on a bunch of other issues that aren't climate focused over the last 100 years. We wanted to bring that to bear as much as we could, and our kind of power as a convener in that sense. And then we also wanted to take solutions, and these are often things that, you know, are working really well or have been proven to work in other areas that we work in. So we have a very kind of comprehensive background on global health. We're now pivoting around, you know, climate and health, particularly climate and health financing, something that works really well in global health, wastewater surveillance. For disease monitoring prevention, how do you apply that in a warming world? How can that help you, you know, enhance your early warning systems? So we really wanted to, as we make this transition, think about our own strengths as a foundation and what the kind of knowledge and expertise and connections that we can bring to bear, specifically as Rockefeller. And the other thing that we wanted to do, and I will give the other panelists a chance to come in, is to really do it thinking about equity. So, you know, all of our energy work, in addition to being focused on, you know, renewable rollout, we're very focused on energy access, right? Like the hundreds of millions of people that are living without energy access. We need to ensure that they are getting clean energy access. But, you know, the energy access part is just as important as the renewable part. So we didn't want to lose any kind of focus on tackling development goals. So we're very committed to tackling climate and development as one goal. That's our aspiration anyway. Sometimes we get it right and sometimes we fail, but that's our goal.
Okay, great. That's a terrific overview. Thank you for that. Marianti, if I could go to you and ask you the same question, what does it mean for you to invest in climate, and how do you sort of go about doing this?
Hi everyone, thank you, Carol. In overall, fraud foundations have a role in the climate financing that we align with our broader mission of the advancing social justice and also equity and human dignity. We integrate the strategy of climate financing into our grantmaking strategy and also collaborate with diverse stakeholders. And also the foundation contribute to building for the sustainable and resilient future for all. We have doing grant-making strategy and also mission investment running by our headquarter office in New York, but mostly grant-making not just from New York, but also from the regional office. We have starting the program of naming an RCC, Natural Resource and Climate Change, in the last 5 years. But previously, our program, we have a program name Expanding Community Right and Voice Over Natural Resources. And in this last 5 years on the NRCC, we aligned maybe publicly common known as the broader social justice and equity work. But we have increasing the recognized and intersectional of climate change with other issues like inequality, poverty, and also injustice. So in the fora of climate financing, sustainable finance, we also have the intersectional issue on the gender equity, disability, and also how to strengthen the resiliency of the civil society, including indigenous people and local community rights in terms of climate justice in the natural resource, in the forest and land use, and also and also energy transition, including critical mineral sectors. And through our regional office, 7 from 11 regional office running this an RCC program from Indonesia, South Africa, West Africa, Indian region, Brazil, and also Mexico office, including New York office. So I think the grant making innovation, we also, beside of grant making, we also have contributed on the innovation financing mechanism. For example, in Indonesia, we work with the government MOU. We have an MOU with the government. We work with some champion in the government on innovative financing in the Ministry of Development Plan. And we have starting to incubate the ecosystem for impact investing, resource mobilization, including the example of resource mobilization that led by the indigenous people local community organization like Nusantara Fund. But we also have starting to provide seed funding to the Indonesia environmental body in the Ministry of Environmental and Forestry on how they're centering justice, making sub-granting to the community-led organization on the forest and land use. And also we built a broader partnership and collaboration with the actor, including the practitioner in the impact investing. And also we support partner in advocacy and policy work on how they rising awareness, public education, and other kind of networking and alliance. Sometimes also we work with our partner to do convening, developing resource hub and other kind of initiative that filling the gap, and also to catalyze and accelerate the ecosystem for the climate finance.
That's a lot. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Paula, I'm going to go to you next. So Paula Ellinger, background, serves as the Climate Action Director at, I'm going to mispronounce this, Fundación Avina, overseeing the climate impact of the foundation in the Global South. As a member of Avina's executive team and focal point to the Green Climate Fund, Paula leverages her expertise to mainstream climate across the portfolio and promote partnerships that can unlock climate finance. She is also a member of Agora Partnerships Board and the WASP Working Group on Adaptation Finance. Okay, so Paula, thanks for joining us today. So throwing the question to you, how do you go about starting funding climate finance?
Yes, thank you, Charlotte, and all. It's absolutely fascinating question and discussion, because investing and funding climate is not as simple as and obvious as it may look like. At Fundación Avina, we started working and funding climate 20 years ago, mainly focused on the Amazon as one of the most important contributions of Latin America to the fight against climate change. And then we also worked strongly on global climate governance and on how to strengthen cooperation for global climate governance. And we continue doing that, which is having programs that are focused at its core on how to tackle climate change. But in the past years, we have been also working on how do we strengthen the climate lens throughout all of our portfolio. And I think this is especially, at least for me, fascinating, because for us, for humanity to really be able to respond to the climate crisis, we need responses that are at all systems level, at all sectors of society, at all levels. It's not only by a niche investment. So with that, in the past 8 years, we have been learning on how to bring the climate approach to different programs that are not initially at its core goal focused at emissions reductions or climate resilience. And this has been a fascinating journey, because at the same time, it's a way to strengthen the impact of different portfolios and also to reduce the risks of investments. And let me just give an example. We have been working for several years on waste pickers cooperatives and how to strengthen waste pickers cooperatives from a social and economic perspective. And on the past 2 years, we have been working with cooperatives on how to develop a methodology to calculate the emissions avoided by cooperatives. And having this number puts cooperatives at another in another position at negotiations tables and with a concrete number to have a say. We are an important part of a just transition. So how to incorporate climate in sectors and investments that are not initially looking at climate is absolutely essential and urgent. Unfortunately, I don't think bringing climate into portfolios perspectives and investment perspectives is a choice anymore. Climate change is here. Emissions did not peak yet. We have just faced the warmest April in the recorded data, so it's here. It's a concrete fact that is shaping all of our lives. So the big question is, how do we incorporate that in all of the portfolio, increasing investments that are directed at reducing emissions at sectors and territories that have opportunities to do so at a fast pace, and also increasing the resilience of communities that are most vulnerable to the impacts. Well, that being said, there are three lessons that I would like to share on this trajectory that we have been going through at Avina, on how do we bring this holistic systemic perspective of climate throughout the entire portfolio. The first is the first and most important step, I would say, is awareness and engaging the highest political level of commitment of the organization. That was absolutely crucial for us, at least, to engage all of our colleagues from the different programs and also partners in looking and transversalizing climate. For example, we signed the Philanthropy for Climate commitment, which was very helpful in bringing the conversation to different areas, from administrations, operations, to impact programs. Secondly, is understanding what are the right questions and the right evidence that we need to understand where there are opportunities to reduce emissions and to increase climate resilience. There's a lot of evidence and climate information building that is needed to understand what it really means to have an impact on climate when you invest in health, in education, in transport and cities. And third, I would say, is not losing focus on justice and simplicity, because the climate space tends to be very niche, very complex, very technical, and it actually does not serve the systemic transition that we need to go through. So I think this is one important challenge for us working on the climate space, which how do we do climate, we talk climate, but without being too complex and closing doors for all sectors.
Okay, thank you, Paula, for that introduction. It's very helpful. Kevin, I'm going to go to you last. So Kevin Tan is the founder and CEO of Tri-Sector Associates, a nonprofit intermediary with the mission to develop new ways for the public, private, and people sectors to collaborate in solving the most complex social problems around Asia. Kevin previously worked at Third Sector Capital Partners, a leading PFS intermediary in the US. He was previously listed by Forbes Asia as one of its 30 under 30 social entrepreneurs, and his work has been featured in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. He holds an MPP Business and Government from the Harvard Kennedy School and a BA in Philosophy, Politics, and Economics at the University of Oxford. So Kevin, thank you for joining us today. I'm going to throw the question to you. How do you start looking at climate finance?
Very kind introduction. And I'd start by saying I'm a bit of an odd duck on the panel because I have no money, actually. So we're sort of a nonprofit investment bank. We help other people with money structure different forms of collaboration and of financing to have more impact. And so we basically do this in two main ways, using different types of new tools, and also by joining up the different issue areas. Having gone through sort of the same journey that I think Elise mentioned, where a lot of the same methodologies that were developed in the social space and healthcare space have started to trickle over to climate space. So I'll just give two examples of these methods and the dot joining that have happened. So on the methods front, one of the big challenges that philanthropy faces is that actually we're the smallest players in the room. If you zoom out and you look at the size of philanthropy versus government, I think around the world it's something like a 1:26 ratio in different places, which basically means that for every year government funds something, philanthropy, even the biggest ones, can only fund it for about 2 weeks. So the challenge is, how do you really leverage that up, get that 2 weeks of money to affect the 1 year? And so some methods that have come up include things like, for example, what's now called blended finance, which is essentially a fancy way of saying, can we use the risk-taking ability of philanthropy to try to take some of the risk off the table or enhance the returns, such that the private sector and government can also participate. And that's one way in which we try to do this. So for example, we helped an international NGO look at how to use blended finance in mangrove conservation for reducing climate-related issues in Indonesia. And doing so, we actually created a technical assistance fund, which many family office philanthropists funded, and that then catalyzed a significant amount of private financing. So that's one example of blended finance and the methods that have been used. And the second thing that we've had to do is to join some of the dots around the different issue areas. So climate can sometimes seem like a niche issue, and that actually works both ways. So people looking at the social and healthcare side of things sometimes don't think of climate as the intervention. And likewise, when we go to the climate guys, sometimes they don't see how actually to deal with the social and healthcare externalities that come about. So for example, in Singapore, every year we end up with a big haze issue where there's a lot of smog, and climate change is certainly making this worse. And the downstream health impact of climate change is huge. And yet somehow the story around the healthcare costs, for example, doesn't quite feature in the climate side of the equation, and vice versa. So that's an area where very often some of the tools that have been used to measure social and healthcare impacts, some of the econometric tools, the data tools, are things that we help people measure to join the dots. So in doing so, we try to basically get that small amount of 2 weeks worth of money to catalyze the 1 year's worth of money. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. I did not know those statistics. That was very interesting about the 2 weeks. So that's a lot to cram in and be impactful. So I guess my next question, this is more from like a funder's side, is, and I'll give this to whoever wants to field this one, is how do you decide which projects to fund? Or who wants to take that? Elise, I'll pick on you.
Hi, sorry, I was struggling with my mute button as well. So I think for Rockefeller, we are sticking with the pillars where we kind of already know that we have expertise. So we work across health, food, finance, and energy. They're kind of our main areas that we focus on. And that enables us to basically learn from the people and the solution, the people that we know already, the ecosystems that we know already, but finding new solutions and bringing in some of the climate thinking more into those spaces. So, I think for us, we're trying also to think, when we're thinking about projects, why would Rockefeller fund this? Like, why are we the right people? Because we don't have the biggest amount of dollars, right? Like, we're not Gates, we're not OSF, we're not dispensing kind of over $1 billion a year. But there are certain things that we bring. Sometimes that's relationships. Sometimes it's our ability to leverage the private sector and get them into the room. So I guess a few examples of things where we've felt that we can make a difference as Rockefeller would be around battery energy storage systems, for example. So like trying to bring together coalitions of developing countries who really want access to this technology, developed countries, and then also what we call resource partners, so people who can provide either financing or the technical expertise to support that rollout. And we see ourselves as being able to add value in that space, not because we've got the biggest amount of dollars, not because our 2 weeks worth of money is going to enable a battery storage system to be rolled out in Malawi, but because we know that we can bring those people together and kind of keep it consistent and leverage those convenings and those connections in a way that drives outcomes and drives political pressure. So yeah, I think that's how we approach it. Is we think about we think about the spaces that we know, and a big one of those is obviously energy. And I've used a couple of examples from that area, but it's not only energy. We do a lot on finance. We're working a lot on with Prime Minister Motley on the Bridgetown agenda, and something that we did around that where we felt we could really add value was back in 2021 under the Italian G20 presidency. We stepped in to support some of the technical work around capital adequacy frameworks in multilateral development banks. And so we felt like philanthropy's marginal dollar was best spent supporting a bunch of modelling and the time of some members of our team as well, participating in this panel, which already had a political home. It already had somewhere where we knew the output was going to go. And so we felt like we could kind of come in and put rocket boosters under the impact that could have. But it was already an existing thing that, there was political will behind it. We just came in and provided a bit of kind of firepower, I guess. And I think that point that Kevin made around, where does the marginal dollar have the most impact is really important in philanthropy, a really, really important thing to consider. Because, we're not going to be the people that, have the most dollars and can afford to fund, a just energy transition partnership with South Africa. But what we did do at Rockefeller was get involved in the initial kind of setting the conditions and the enabling environment for that to happen and helping finance some of the initial technical work. We've done something similar recently in the Philippines. So it's about identifying kind of where we can add value at the scale that the problem requires at that moment in time, I think. And it varies, again, depending on sector, which is why we've chosen to stick with the kind of pillars that we know, because that's where we feel like we can have the most impact.
Thank you, Elise. That makes sense. Mariati, can I get you on this? From your perspective, how do you go about addressing this question of what do we fund?
Yeah. First of all, because we try Ford Foundation work to support a partner in the trust building mechanism and also the long-term partnership, and we have shared our concern and analysis with them, including on the evaluation and also strategic reference. We necessarily heard our partner and also our the community as well and stakeholder, of course. First, we will see that how based on we define the objective. So, for example, in the NRCC program, we focusing on mitigations rather than adaptation. So, for example, of the mitigations on how we avoid the emission from the energy sectors and how we work with our partner to engage in the effort to phase out fossil energy to the renewable energy, and how the enabling environment for renewable energy, including how we protect forests and decrease deforestation in the forest and land use issue, and also how the in the area of centering justice for indigenous people and local community, affected people, including labor, for example, in the energy sectors. And also because we try to in line with what we work with is 3 I's. We work with the with people who has a most impacted and good ideas, and we work with the individual and we work with the institution. So we align our strategy also through the research and due diligence with them. And also we work with and through alliance, so like Alliance of Philanthropy, for example, Climate and Land Use Alliance, Energy and Finance Alliance, for example. And also we see the context of the regions, for example, in the South Africa and Indonesia and Senegal, because they are part of the JETP countries, Just Energy Transition, that launched in the COP26 in Glasgow for the first time. we align our grant making and also a partnership with them to see how the possibility of JETP can be part of to accelerate the decarbonization in the energy sector. That's kind of example. And also, we also engage with the strategic partner like government, but through our partner on how they strategically working on providing, for example, the ESG standard and safeguard, and also how to democratization of the energy transition mechanism through participation, inclusiveness, and also accountability mechanism. And I think we also try to develop the kind of impact assessment and also metrics for evaluation. Of course, we try to necessarily reflect our strategy with our partners. And I think I will give you the link that we just finished our independent evaluation of NRCC that you can find in our website. And this is make us to be the next milestone, why we focus on the mitigation and who we will work with and through what kind of the strategic priority that we want to emphasize from now until the future. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Paula, I have a different question for you, if I may. A question about prioritization. So obviously climate, we're here to talk about climate, but we all want to do other things as well. So how do you sort of balance climate with everything else you're doing? I liked how earlier Kevin said, you know, climate also goes into like issues of public health, and there's a lot, it's not just that climate's its own sort of hermetically sealed issue. But keeping that in mind, how do you sort of structure and prioritize that with everything else you have on your plate?
Thank you, Charlotte. Well, at Avina, the approach we have been taking is we balance having at least one program that aims directly at climate governance. And that's where we are looking at climate as the primary goal, and where we are looking for, as Elise said, this opportunities for systemic change, where we can have catalytic impacts, where our role connecting local to global can help advance in face of collaboration gaps. And then in parallel to that, what we do is we work with the other 7 programs that we have at Avina, not to maintaining their core goals, which are on access to water, circular economy, conservation of biomes, innovation for democracy, and others, to engage the climate perspective in this transversal approach. So the way of balancing that is not necessarily switching the focus, but rather enriching the focus of these programs with a better understanding of how climate connects to the various agenda. In that way, we can have a more holistic perspective of development, incorporating how climate is a risk to several, represents a risk for several of our partners, and the resilience of some of the solutions being implemented, for example, on water or on access to internet in rural areas. And also we look for opportunities to foster solutions and prioritize in that way solutions that have an impact in reducing emissions. So it's a work, as I was saying previously, to identify what are the right questions and the right information that can help the strategies within each of our programs to be directed towards a greater climate impact.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Paula. That's really helpful. Kevin, can I get you on this? How do you sort of, with all the things you do, how do you fit climate into like everything that you're doing?
You know, I think many of the people we work with on the funder side or government side, they're really looking for where to deploy their money most effectively. And really, I think there are two parts to that. First is trying to figure out where the dollar goes the furthest in terms of an issue area. But also, then there's the question of leverage, how we can make the dollar go further. So for the first thing, where exactly the dollar goes the furthest, you can do things like cost-benefit analyses. You can do some screens around where other people aren't doing as much. So I think a lot of the very sophisticated foundations do that very well. And then how you have more leverage, I think, is where a lot of these innovative new models are coming in. So for example, something that we've adapted to the climate space quite often is this whole idea around outcomes-based or results-based funding, where people have tried to, for example, pay for prevention with things like conserving rhinos or things like conserving forests. And the idea here being that if you manage to do that well, then actually, you can actually save a lot more money downstream. So each philanthropic dollar, each government dollar goes very far if you do it that way. So I think if you kind of take both those figures, which is where the dollar can have most impact, and you try and leverage up as far as possible, then you would then have a good sense of where to deploy it. But I'd also say, just realistically as well, I think in philanthropy, it's not entirely technocratic that way. People often do have just causes that they want to support. So let's say it's sort of pick a cause, and then within that, you optimize the way I described. So I think that's really how we've seen it work in practice.
It always seems to be after you speak, Kevin.
Sorry, no, sorry.
I might be the problem. Sorry, Charlotte.
No, it's okay. I can't recognize that no one else is hearing my own voice. Apologies. What I meant to say is thank you, Kevin, for that response. And that now I'm pivoting to the Q&A. So if any of you have questions for our panelists that you would like, please put them into the Q&A, and you can vote for the questions that you would like as a priority. So the first one I'm going to go to, and whoever wants to take this, This is from Emily. So she says, hi, everyone. Emily Vyson from the British Red Cross here. I'm interested to learn more about how we can balance meeting people's needs through philanthropy while being environmentally conscious and helping people to tackle climate issues in their own communities. So who wants to take that one? All right, Elise, I'll go to you.
I knew you were going to do that. So I think, our kind of perspective is that I'm going to take meeting people's needs as kind of sustainable development and the sustainable development goals, right, in this context. So our perspective is that these challenges are so interwoven at this point that you do just have to do climate resilient development. And it's exactly what Paola was saying before. We can't continue with business as usual. A lot of development prior was about, increasing prosperity and increasing living standards, and that is really important. But if you increase living standards in the current number, I think is 81 countries who are classed as energy poor, then 75% of our emissions are going to come from those countries by 2050, unless we do something about the kind of climate angle to that development. So, that's just one example, but we really need to be tackling the two things at the same time. And I think that there is like an increasing recognition, or my sense, maybe I'm just an optimist, but my sense is that from speaking to a lot of people in the community and, in government as well, is that there is an increasing recognition in places like the World Bank, in government, in philanthropy, that you can't only be thinking about climate change, you have to be thinking about people-centered climate solutions. So yeah, that's our approach.
I have now unmuted myself. Thank you, Elise. That's fantastic. Marianti, how about you? How do you, going back to Emily's question, how do you meet people's needs through philanthropy while being environmentally conscious? I really liked how you said, Elise, that there's the idea that as a country develops, it consumes more energy, its carbon footprint gets bigger. And on one hand, it's great, as you said, that a country is developing, but not so great that it's polluting more. But we need to match people's needs. So Marianti, how would you tackle that question?
I think I will talk to back again about the concern of the community and what they need, and the context of how the community is struggling, and also the context of the nature that they live. And it would be back also on the level of the impact, and also the modalities, the possibilities to be part of the climate solution of with the community and also with the stakeholder at that area. In it will depend on the what context. But I also agree with Paula on how we develop the local global nexus of the climate strategy, because we just have one planet, and one each other have a singular action and reactions, and also the impact on, and we hand in hand together. So I want to I prefer to try to avoid this how we work on more effectively, to avoid silo and also overlapping, and also integrating and collaboratively is better, rather than we work in our own pipeline and our initiative and others, but we never know how the impact would produce. So that's why the convening hubs, resilience, resource support is very important. Second, I want to talk also with stakeholder on how we see the key foundation and enabling environment to ensure those kind of the climate commitment and effort that can be more effectively making impact, rather than how we just identify the problem and solution, but tackling um, the the technically and also scientifically and socially can be more effective for change. So I think that's what we trying to do. Yeah. So
Great.
many questions below.
Yeah, there's so many questions. I'm trying to get through these. They're really good questions. You guys are asking very good questions. Thank you for that. So the next one that's been upvoted, I apologies if I mispronounce your name. This is from Marlies from South Pole. And they write, I often see that impact investing arms of foundations are disconnected from the grant programs. Okay. Sometimes the investments are informed by the grant strategy, but not the other way around. How are foundations addressing these internal barriers? That's a good question. Do any of you have any sort of experience with impact investing and think you can tackle this? Kevin, I see you nodding.
I'm not a foundation, so I'll have others talk about it. But you know, we are affiliated with the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Funds Foundation, and I've also seen how this works in other foundations. I think well, first of all, I think it's really exciting that the foundations themselves have a whole spectrum of money that they can deploy now, ranging from pure grants to pure investing, and then everything in between. So including the impact investing element. And I think the really interesting thing to address is how do we maximize the impact across all of these different instruments, even if actually some of them may need to have a lower return. I know there's sometimes the saying that actually there's no trade-off, but let's say that there is. If the point of the endowment was to maximize impact, how exactly should we trade that off, right? So then I think the specific question that Marlies had was, okay, so then how do the impact investing strategies align with the grant making strategies? And I'd say that it's not necessarily, it doesn't need to be the same at a technical level per se. I think the different types of capital will have different types of roles to play. I think they should share a common view of the world, perhaps, but then the actual way in which they intervene should rightfully be different, because that's the difference in their mandates. I like to leave one more thought actually, which is that I think I was trained as an economist, so I think I look at this from economics lens. In the end, actually, what we should be striving towards is where we price all of these downstream externalities or bad stuff that happens that the market doesn't pay for, such that there isn't this trade-off that needs to be made. We've made remarkable advances on the carbon side in recent years, and there's still issues with that. But the carbon side, even many of carbon credits include things like jobs already, so there's a little bit of a social angle to that. But in my other hat, where I look at social and healthcare work, there's now a whole effort to do voluntary social credits. And then, of course, there's the whole conversation around biodiversity credits. So you can fast forward a couple of years, you could even imagine a situation where actually that trade-off between impact and return becomes a lot less. And so, then actually that the differences between the different strategies across the foundation's arms would be less and less. But right now, because the markets don't reward that, so then rightfully they should be doing different things. Let me stop here and hand it to somebody with actually an endowment.
Yes, from a foundation. Does anyone else want to take that one?
I can, I mean, very briefly, we are still learning, I think, about this, and we have kind of a set of program-related investments that are part of kind of the Rockefeller Foundation's programming. And we have found that focusing those quite narrowly, so we're very focused on preventing deforestation in the Amazon, and that's our strategy. So it's complementary to our programmatic work, but we don't have a big nature focus in our programmatic work. So the PRI, program-related investment strategy, kind of complements that, and it's also a geography that we're trying to grow our kind of nexus and relationships in. So that helps. It's complementary, but it's not doing the same thing, exactly as Kevin said. So that's kind of how we've approached it. But I think you're totally right that ultimately the end goal is to get to a place where the systemic risks of, a lot of the impacts of climate change are being priced in by investors in the same way, actually, that at the moment they're pricing in the risks of transition. And so if you look at kind of the way that a lot of this kind of transition planning and forward thinking about risk is being done, a lot of investment consultants specifically are thinking a lot about the kind of risks of transition, costs of transition. They're reflected, but not necessarily what the costs of a kind of 2-degree scenario, 2.5-degree scenario as set out by the IPCC are. So I think that is the ultimate aim, is that you get to a place where risks are consistently priced, and then that will totally change the dynamic. But at the moment, we kind of use the two things for different things.
Okay, thank you, Elise. So one more question. This comes from Richard. He writes, what role do you see strategic litigation play against fossil fuel companies, financial institutions, etc., in addressing the climate crisis? And how comfortable, in your opinion, is the philanthropic community in supporting the strategy to deliver change? So, best of my knowledge, none of you guys have ever gone out and sued a fossil fuel company with your foundations. But outside of that, what are your thoughts on this as a strategy? Paula, I'll go to you. I can see you thinking.
Sorry, thanks. I definitely think it's a strategy that's showing more impact every day. So an important strategy, especially as we see the need for supporting and strengthening civic movements around the globe and supporting the civic space, which is shrinking in several spaces. So how does philanthropy connect more to civil society and civic movements in the fight against climate change? There is an interesting number from the Climate Works report on the trends on climate philanthropy from last year, which showed that although finance for climate in the philanthropic space has not grown significantly in the last year, there was an important increase in what is corporate accountability. So how do we strengthen the strategies for corporate accountability, including litigation to fossil fuel companies? I think it's very important in the context that we are living in the different spaces.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Paula. I think we have time to take one last question, and this is an advice question. This comes from Cecilia. So she says, despite our dedication, we face challenges in capturing the attention of foundations beyond animal advocacy, particularly those focused on climate change. Do you have any advice on how we can tailor our message to better engage with foundations, especially those focusing on climate change? So do any of you want to give some good advice on that one? Well, I think I see you speaking, but it's on
Can you
mute.
repeat the question? I'm
Oh,
trying
sorry.
to find.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sorry. So it's asking for advice. Despite our dedication, we find challenges in capturing the attention of foundations beyond animal advocacy, particularly those focused on climate change. Do you have any advice on how we can tailor our message to better engage with foundations, especially those focusing on climate change?
What I didn't understand is they are working on animal
From what I understand from the question, it seems to be that many foundations do focus on animal advocacy primarily as part of their climate change, as their approach to tackling climate change. But I think, Cecilia, if I'm reading into your question correctly, it's if we're doing something else outside of animal advocacy that still falls within the domain of climate change, how do we get your attention and say, this is something you need to be funding?
I think, I think the first thing I would say is that for a lot of people, thinking about animal and biodiversity impacts of climate change are a really helpful way in. So if you're trying to engage audiences that have not traditionally been particularly engaged on climate change, it can be really helpful to talk about, you know, orangutans and polar bears, because it is a really kind of, it's a really emotive topic, and I think it has an important place in engaging people in the climate movement. And I think this kind of move that we're seeing overall in terms of nature for climate solutions and really focusing on the battle to save nature as a core part of climate action is a very current and a very welcome trend. In terms of how to get foundations' attention, I think it's really hard, because the one thing that I have learned in my, nearly year in this space now is that we're all so different. And so one strategy that might work for someone like Rockefeller won't necessarily work for, a regional re-grantor in wherever it is that you're based. So I think kind of being able to demonstrate really clearly why you are the best partner to deliver the objectives, number one, and number two, how the outcomes really align with the strategy of the foundation that you're trying to engage with, is probably the best starting point. But beyond that, I don't think that there is like a one size fits all in terms of securing funding, because we are just all extremely different, and it really varies depending on the different models of philanthropy as well, whether you've got an endowment, whether you've got a model like the Bezos Earth Fund where, Amazon is selling shares in order to finance their grant making. It really varies dependent on the model of the foundation, whether the founder is living and involved, or whether you've got kind of maybe a family member on your board but you're endowed and you're separate, versus whether you're a re-grantor and you're actually fundraising yourself to then pass it on to local grantees. So I think it is worth also taking the time to understand the model of the foundation that you're trying to engage with. But those would be my very generic pieces of advice. Others might have more.
Right. Thank you, Elise. I really appreciate that. I think that's helpful. We only have a few minutes left to sort of get your parting thoughts. So Marianti, if I can start with you, a parting thought of what have you learned sort of in your time working in climate finance that you would like to share with our participants?
Thank you. I learned a lot on how we have to define our strategy and also making it options, because we cannot do many things for and also everything that we are interested, but we have to choose. Second, using data analysis, data scientific analysis is very important. I mean, like by evidence and also analyze the risk, but also the opportunity. Also, we have to, I think I learned a lot on how we identify the key area that's we believe based on analysis that would effectively making impact, and trying to see in detail and carefully about um, uh, the tangible but also the intangible impact that will be create, and how the model of collaborations with the stakeholders. I think that's very important on the climate financing and also the grant making and strategic, including the mission investment as a philanthropy did in this area. And aligned with the power dynamic of the change maker, the actor that we work with, like government, private sector, civil society, including think tanks, scientists. That's very important. And to be consistent and long-term as part of the journey, I think we need to necessarily make a reflection, evaluation, and also see how we navigate our strategy, including hearing and learning from our partner. That's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariati. I appreciate that. Closing thoughts, Paula, can I get some from you? What have you learned working in this space?
Thanks so much. First, we do need to increase significantly investments for climate and climate adaptation, because this is a reality that is shapes all the sectors and decisions that we have. But in parallel, as we increase investments in climate, we need to increase overall capacities in society to understand how climate is integrated in each and every level of decision. And for that, we need a combination of strong evidence, and we need to have evidence and information that is accessible to local level and all stakeholders, because to take an informed decision on climate, you need information. So evidence and information is very important. Not only scientific information, also value traditional knowledge is crucial. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done on not only building knowledge, but also making knowledge accessible to all stakeholders. And then the urge to look for simplicity and translation, so that we can have a scientific and traditional knowledge-oriented vision for the future, but without getting trapped in the complexities and technicalities that the climate space often has. So looking for this convergence of information, evidence, and simplicity, I think it's very important to guide an investment strategy in climate. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Paula. I appreciate that. Elise, parting thoughts?
I think I would just say, and this is broader than just climate finance, that having come in from government just less than a year ago, I think the thing that really strikes me is that we are not constrained in the way that governments are by politics or by the need to demonstrate value for taxpayers' money. We're not constrained like businesses are by our shareholders and investors. We really have quite a lot of freedom, and so we're therefore in quite a unique position to take risks in terms of both the way that we spend our money and the way that we spend our time and our risk diplomacy, I suppose you could call it. And so I think my kind of takeaway is just that we really need to make the most of this unique position that we are in, with the limited time we have available to address the climate crisis, to really aim for impact.
Fantastic. Thank you, Elise. And Kevin, last one, parting thoughts you want to leave us with?
I'll just leave one given time.
Okay.
It's about the importance of cross-pollination. Just to make this live, I was on a biodiversity panel watching one a few years ago, and I heard the biodiversity people say, hey, I really envy those carbon guys. They've got their lives so simple. They just have one metric. And coming from the social impact space where we have 40 metrics, it's like, oh, we're jealous of you guys. It's so easy to solve that. So I think actually a lot of the different mechanisms have started to come together across the different spaces. And actually a lot of the, if only I could solve this, if I could solve this, if only I had this one thing, actually probably exists somewhere else. So just encourage us to look beyond the narrow spaces that we sometimes silo ourselves in to the other spaces, because I think the solutions are out there.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you, Kevin. That's a good note to leave us on. I want to thank all of you today for joining us. I know that our panelists are joining us from many time zones. So thank you for waking up early in Argentina and staying up late in Singapore. I want to remind everyone that there is a discount code for Alliance in the chat if you want to take advantage of that. And any other questions that you want for our panelists you didn't think about, you can email me, Charlotte at Alliance Magazine, and I will field them to them. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate your time today. This has been a really insightful conversation.
Thanks
Thank
so much, Charlotte.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice afternoon. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.